The Catcher in the Rye through the Peephole.
Why do you think Holden isolated himself so much? Was he scared? Holden felt as if everyone was on the right track, whether they treaded or paraded down this track of this ideal societal track of growing up and accepting that the end point of this track is death. They were still on the track. Whereas Holden was the only one who wished to stay at the starting point, as he feared all the obstacles that lay in front of him. He only focused on the snakes of growing up, which was reaching the end point of death, rather than the ladders that help people evolve and grow into beautiful human beings who experience the array of experiences we're set down on this earth to go through. Holden detached himself from all the authority figures in his life that made sure he stuck to the rules of the game. The authority figures being his teachers, principal, friends such as Stradlater, and most importantly his parents, as well as his sister Phoebe. The rules of the game being moving on from the start point to finally reach the end point of death. And this end point comes and greets each player at different points of each person's life. Some people reach their end point much sooner than expected, whereas others' endpoints are delayed and keep unwinding endlessly. Holden figured that if he cut himself off from all the other players and the rule keepers who kept societal protocol a criteria for social and personal acceptance, he would delay rolling the dice and being forced to move away from the starting point that he'd been eased into this life with, only to be forced into leaving touch base with the starting point and having to grow up, inching closer and closer to death. Did the events that unfold in the book make you want to change the way you live your life? As mentioned before, Holden didn't want to grow up, as he felt growing up led him closer to death. A superior maneuvering creature that Holden felt trailed behind him and leapt at him throughout the book. Going into depth on Holden's views on death and how he views this inevitable full stop to our lives as a finite aspect, as a finite spirit. It just made me reflect on my perspective of death. My grandmother passed away a year ago after courageously battling with cancer. And though she left in a way we wouldn't have wanted her to, she left with a smile and imprinted her love in our family that we hold on to today. Despite the ups and downs she faced throughout her life, she left not giving up and embraced when the time came. She embraced her passing when the time came. This experience personified death to be something so horrible, yet noble at the same time, as it means accepting that our bodies wear out, but our souls live on forever. Connecting this new outlook that's recently become more apparent to me to Allie's passing, this outlook to Allie's passing, and my own prior perspective on death, I see the common theme of human beings passing with their souls smiling and thanking God for that episode. This makes me want to change my life so that I'm living each and every moment in honor of the last and in honor of the next, improving my actions and enhancing my love emitted. This book has made me embrace death and accept it so that I die in salvation, accepting my destiny and thanking God for the form my body took and this character that I'm playing right now. What would you do differently to Holden in his situation? All of us have one big fear that daunts us and keeps us up at night, and Holden's big fear is death. I too have had a huge fear that kept me up at night, and I'm so grateful that I've received the help to get over this fear. But either way, this fear cast me under a dark spell, and from this dark spell, from this horrible experience, rather a strengthening experience, I've learned two things from two ways to deal with fear. One is to announce your fear, and the other is to seek help. I say announce your fear because it helps you accept you have it, over solely acknowledging and tolerating it, or in Holden's case, completely shutting it out and denying it, and not even thinking about it, suppressing those thoughts and those fears and those frights. Announcing your fear also tethers you with other people in the world who share the same dark thoughts as you do, making you feel less alone. However, there will be some people who will use your vulnerabilities against you, which is why you have to be selective of who you wish to undress your interior in front of. Though Holden's problems seem to be so internal and personal, speaking about his problems and seeking help would help him in a million ways. It would help him release this burden he carries, because the truth is, a little part of everyone fears death, and so Holden isn't alone in a world of 7 billion people who could be. In conclusion, if I were Holden, I would divert my time and energy into accepting my fear and seeking help. Instead of whiling away my time calling everyone else out for being phony. Because if I'm not accepting my own fear and identity, I'm no less phony than everyone else is. Did Holden's way of thinking about child and adulthood mirror your own? If it isn't, then how so? If it is, then how so? There were similarities and differences between my life and his. In many ways, I too idolized my childhood to be a utopian world that I sometimes wish had just paused itself right there, just like Holden does.
I think that Holden views the transition from childhood to adulthood to be scary, as it is one step closer to death. Holden sees purity in childhood and phoniness in adulthood. Holden initially sees the passing to adulthood to be one where he would have to give up childhood, which he realizes isn't the case. I feel I see childhood and adulthood differently, instead of childhood being separate to adulthood, and that you move to a new phase of your life when you grow up. I see childhood to be a preparation for adulthood, where you learn the basic skills of life and then take them and move on to later stages instead of leaving them behind. In life, I feel everything just keeps on building as we grow, just like a plot of grass, and by the time we are 90, that plot of grass is filled with buildings and roads and malls. To me, every stage of life carries on and helps with the next stage, and this is a continuation, which is different to Holden, who sees the different stages of life not being connected. If I was put in a place where society was trying to tell me to grow up and change, and yet I wanted to stay a pure, innocent child, I would most likely change with society. I happen to go with the flow a lot and don't really question what's happening around me, and this is where he and I differ. Holden comes to a point where he has to decide whether to follow with society and grow up and follow their etiquettes, or not be one with society. For me, this is a very easy choice, as I don't really mind what happens and I'm a follower. But for Holden, he had to really think whether he should follow the norm, even though he may have to give up on his past, or to not be part of society. Also, Holden clearly loved his childhood, making it a very hard thing to give up. However, for me, I don't feel like my childhood was that special, so I don't mind leaving it, and actually I'm looking forward to adulthood, where I get the freedom to experience new things. Holden felt as if society was against him, not as much as he was against them. He felt that everyone who was a child wanted to push him away from being a child, and everyone who was an adult wanted to keep him a child. For example, when he was at the park and the children looked odd at him, he felt like he didn't belong. In the same way, when he talked to adults of his age or elder, he felt they didn't understand him. This put him in a very awkward place, where he didn't know if he should see himself as a child or an adult, and in the middle he felt alone. Because here in the middle he wasn't recognized to be in the same group with anyone else. This made him get stuck in a place of transition, called being a teenager, where you feel like you don't belong, and now he's scared of how he's going to make it out of this place. This makes him just want to leave from everyone, as he's at a point where he's too scared and he's just stuck. This is similar to when I have a lot of projects happening, and I get so nervous about how I'm going to complete it, so I end up just trying to find ways to run away from doing all the work. The events in this novel definitely made me want to change. I saw how Holden was being manipulated by society, as if he was a puppet to their puppet master, even though he put up a good fight to stop society and the norm, he lost in the end. Holden felt as if society was putting pressure on him to change, even though he wanted to remain a child, as he feared the end result of change, death, and also losing his memories and past. This has made me rethink about my life and see how I too have societal pressures to grow up. But instead of fighting them, I will now embrace them and choose to follow them and grow up as society expects. I will do this without being afraid of losing my childhood, as the book pointed out, that even though you may grow up, all your memories and things you have loved to do as a kid will remain the same for later. For example, the museum or the merry-go-round. This has given me the assurance that I shouldn't try and hold on to whatever is left of my childhood, and instead grow up. Also, the book has showed me that change is inevitable, so instead of fighting it only to succumb, I will just embrace the moment but not get attached. This will allow me to be able to witness new experiences in the future and not just be stuck with the old ones from the past.
Why do you think Holden isolated himself so much? Was he scared? I think that Holden isolated himself so much because he was avoiding the most crucial phase in our teenager lives. Our transition from childhood to adulthood, our own frozen lake. Holden knew he wasn't ready for this transition, and he was afraid that after the winter was over and the time for this transition was over, he would remain frozen in the lake for the next winter to come. We can relate this to ourselves because we are at this stage and we know this. Therefore, adults which are already past this stage will not be able to relate with it so much because they forgot how it feels. This shapes the way we analyze why Holden was so scared of this specific stage and allows us to come to a conclusion that he was scared of how he would change after the lake was unfrozen with himself in it. Finally, he would cross from being a child to arrive at an end and become an adult. Did the events that unfold in the book make you want to change the way you live your life? Looking at how Holden lives his life being frozen in the lake, which means Looking at how Holden lives his life being frozen in a lake, I feel like I understand better the stage of life which I am at right now. Reading this, I was basically led to understood that us readers, which are the teenagers, are in the same situation as Holden. Frozen in a lake, which when unfrozen will either lead us to adulthood or leave us at childhood. I now realize that I must not remain in this lake and that I should let it carry me to the unfrozen position of transforming to an adult. What would you do differently to Holden in his situation? Instead of insisting to be my own hunter, my own person with the red cap, and be the only person who can help push myself out of this lake, I would turn to society and accept its help. Having more people in society to help me would result in more red hunting caps to hunt me away from this lake and metaphorically prevent me from freezing in it. Although at the end of the novel, Holden suggested he wasn't going to remain frozen, I still think that if he opened up to more members of society, it would help him reach a position where he was going to easily transform into adulthood and prevent him from almost remaining frozen in the lake. Therefore, I can conclusively say that unlike Holden, I would turn for help and allow myself to be in more convenience and ease whilst passing this obstacle of childhood. The freezing lake, symbolizing the change from childhood to adulthood. Did Holden's way of thinking about childhood and adulthood mirror your own? If it isn't, then how so? Holden's way of thinking about childhood and adulthood is different than mine. Holden is scared of hunting himself past the lake and is afraid to push himself over the boundaries to prevent remaining in the frozen lake. Holden wants to remain frozen, at least in the beginning of the novel. Whilst I'm the complete opposite, this is not directly because of me, however. The reason I'm not willing to stay frozen like Holden was is because I am not the only hunter of myself pushing me over the lake. I have many hunters, many people in red caps in this society because I turn to them or I'm turned toward them. Because I open up to them, the teachers, my school program, my parents, and all my friends all have this cap and push me over the lake. Unlike Holden, which don't want to be pushed, and didn't have anyone to push him towards this stage of transforming.
Did the events that unfold in the book make you want to change the way you live your life? Reading this book, well, reading this book did not change the way that I live my life, since even though Holden's story is pretty compelling to a lot of people, I feel like it just doesn't relate to me as much. I mean, like Holden, I do have a fear of growing up at times, but I know that I need to. And I've also accepted that each and every moment I'm alive, life's only gonna get even harder than it already is. And, well, I've had the luxury of being born in a wealthy family where I almost never had any troubles at all. I mean, I always had my sister or my maids to help me with anything, and I got everything I wanted. Because of this, I grew up really, really differently to a lot of my peers, since I barely ever knew the concept of no, because I got everything I wanted. But through my sister leaving for college, I learned that not everything will always stay the same. In fact, nothing will stay the exact same. And when my sister left, that was the first time well, I didn't get what I wanted. It was the first time that I didn't have any help trying to stop something or get something, since, well, no one really could help. And, well, unlike Holden, I was able to realize that inevitably I will have to change and adapt accordingly whenever something happens. Although, ironically, I don't really feel like I need to change my way of life, since it is weird, indefinitely, and it's probably a lot different to my peers. I mean, it's always been like that. But my life has its own little way of working out, somehow. Although some might think that it's really, really ineffective or even stupid to live life the way that I do. But for me, it's perfect. I mean, I always live my life knowing that something will end. And this helps me accept the new responsibilities given to me each and every day, since I know that those responsibilities will also end. This way of thinking helps me really just be at peace with almost anything that is thrown at me. Okay, so why do you think Holden isolated himself so much? Well, I think that Holden, like a lot of us really, find it pretty difficult to open up to people. This distrust in people even goes all the way to the people that are closest to him. Like many, he fears growing older and having to take on a lot of responsibilities that growing older entitles, like living on your own or something like that. I believe that he thought that everyone wanted to change him. Like, his friends wanted him to get older while he wanted to just stay young, even though he can't, since time. This brings up the dilemma that time itself is not on his side. Well, it's not on anyone's side, really. Things suddenly become more complicated as a result of it being growing up. This overwhelms him, since He wasn't prepared, and he feels that his only way to stay young, in his mind at least, is to shut out anyone who wants him to grow up, which incidentally is more or less everyone in his life. I think that he does this because he still doesn't want to accept the amount of responsibilities that adulthood unwillingly brings, making him want to stay young, where everything is much simpler and he doesn't have much responsibilities.